You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey guys, welcome to Cards to the Moon. This is episode 161, and it is another Friday episode. My name is Clark from 5 Card Guys on Instagram and 5cardguys.com. Co-hosting with me as usual is Hyung of Integrity Sports Cards and John, who is Trade You at Recess. Okay, off the top, the bleeding continues at Panini with the news this week that Panini has reportedly lost its license with the WWE for breach of contract with 2+ years left on the contract. Panini, just for some context, Panini has refuted the allegation that they failed to produce, quote, physical trading card games and digital trading cards, end quote, which was apparently the reason for the breach of contract. And Panini has since sued WWE to try to prevent them from losing that WWE license. Darren Ravel also tweeted that Fanatics, which had a deal with WWE starting in 2026, they're expected to get the rights immediately if this countersuit or if this suit by Panini isn't successful. So initial thoughts on all of this. I feel like we're talking about Panini every other week now. And you know, I can't help but think, is this now really the beginning of the end for Panini? What do you guys think?
So was this, it was because they didn't make the trading card games that they were supposed to?
Yes, that's what I believe.
But
to understand, yeah.
From my understanding, they tripled that business.
What do you mean?
Panini did. Basically, in terms of the revenue that they were doing with WWE before, it's it's 3 times as much as what Topps was doing. But it's interesting. I mean, is it calculated? Seems like it, right? Like find a way. And then Panini's suing WWE too, right?
Yeah, that's what I mentioned.
So apparently there's like $5.6 million of royalties that's owed to, I guess it would be WWE for the last 2 years or last year in sales, right? Yeah, that's, I mean, yeah, it seems like it might be Panini's, dagger, I guess. But it's a tough situation for Panini, definitely. I mean, I think standing from like a hobby standpoint, I think the Prism brand was pretty strong in WWE, which is unfortunate. I think a lot of people aren't happy with the news in general, but it was inevitable. Fanatics penetrating the market. Ruben's known to be savage when it comes to business and, doing things calculated and strategic to basically, get what he wants at the end of the day. Right. So yeah, I just think it's not a good situation for sure for Panini. They're running out of options here. It's just, I don't know why didn't Panini make those trading games? Like, why give a reason to, I guess.
Right. I don't know. That's a good question.
But at the same time, if you tripled the revenue, shouldn't that make up for any loss? So it's just finding a reason to kind of say, okay, how can we end this deal sooner than later and get Fanatics on board? Because Fanatics does have a lot of, I guess, leverage because they've always done the licensing and apparel and stuff like that, the other side of the business. So it just makes sense that they're literally bullying and kind of penetrating the market the way, a monopoly does. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I think this is about to spell the end of Panini in sports cards. It's pretty crazy. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, similar thing happened with the NFLPA, right? It was basically cut. Terminated effective immediately, right? I don't think they reported what it was exactly, but some breach of contract, something very similar, right? Yeah. And I mean, this is just completely my opinion, but kind of similar to what Hyung was saying. I think I feel like, I feel like Fanatics made a play at Panini a little while ago. You know how it seemed like it was very close. Like some people were reporting how the Fanatics website looked like the Panini's website, et cetera, et cetera. It was about to be imminent. Sports Card Investor was all these murmurs saying like at the National, like it was pretty much imminent. It was going to happen. And for me, I feel like, the Panini might have tried to strong arm or tried to be stubborn about it. This is, again, just completely being speculative.
Right.
And Fanatics was like, you know what? All right, you want to play hardball? Here we go. And this is all just legal posturing. I think it's not a question of what didn't Panini do or why did Panini do this and they breached No, I don't think that's it. I think Fanatics found loopholes and soft areas to press buttons to pretty much force their way into Panini and to just end them and then force a buyout at some point, get them cheap on the dollar. Like, I feel like that's what's happening here. Because otherwise a lot of it doesn't make any sense. Because obviously from Panini's camp, they're pretty much saying like, we did absolutely nothing wrong. We're going to countersue. And Fanatics got way too much money. They're just going to, at this point, I think they're just going to stomp on Panini, which is a little sad, but I'm sure at some point the trading card business will be sold.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, and everything you mentioned, very, very plausible. I think from like you said, everything we've heard in the hobby over the last several months, right? And like it's funny because I'm looking at other social media accounts and seeing what their reaction is to this news. I think it's a great curator who mentioned, he's not, I guess, overly happy with Panini losing their license because he really wanted to see National Treasures wrestling cards, like high-end wrestling cards. That would have been sweet, I'm sure, for wrestling card collectors. Right. So yeah, I guess unless they already made it and they're going to release it, apparently that's something that Panini, Darren Ravel also reported that they are also releasing product anyways.
They're still selling, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
that's awesome.
You know what? Yeah. So they're just like, we're going to sell and make whatever money we can until we absolutely can't, I guess. But yeah, it's a crazy story, and we'll see how things play out, and I'm sure we'll hear more in the very near future. Okay, so for this episode's Friday discussion, I actually wanted to talk about players to pivot a bit. Players from small market teams and purely from an investment perspective, okay? I'm not talking about superstars and generational players like Connor McDavid playing in Edmonton or Patrick Mahomes playing in Kansas City, right? But think players who are expected to have great careers or even hot prospects right now proving their worth in these smaller cities. Are they still worth the investment, or do you think it's risky because since they play for a small market team, it caps their value because the fan base isn't as large to create sufficient demand for their rookie cards? I guess that's what the thinking is, right? And we always say, when we do these pick ones, one of the negative factors is if they do play for a small market team, that kind of plays into how we choose what cards we like to invest, right? So want to ask you guys, and before you answer, think of a player like Corbin Carroll. This is why I came out with the idea. Corbin Carroll, he became the first rookie to hit 25 home runs and steal 50 bases, which is an amazing achievement. But will playing in Arizona cap his long-term value, even if he keeps up this pace for a good chunk of his career? What do you guys think?
I think so. Does it make sense? No. But I also believe in, and we're all believers in this, is, buy what you love, because things can sway, markets can sway. And I think, to the point you were making earlier about, small market teams, I think that was more relevant in the past. I think it's starting to change, especially with the internet. You look at every small market team in, let's just say MLB, they're not small market. Like Padres 10 years ago used to be a small market team.
Right.
They're dropping $300 million contracts on Tatis, Bogarts, Soto, the list goes on, right? So I think, and there's a huge collectability within those guys, even though San Diego was considered a small market team before, right? So,
yeah.
And even then, you really only have Padres fans in San Diego. So, for me, I think long term, I think there's going to be great opportunities now because people think that way. I think in the past too, you've seen how small market teams affect prices, like Nolan Arenado, for instance. Guy was a legend in Colorado, still is a legend, going to be a Hall of Famer. Absolutely no love. He started getting more love when he came over to St. Louis a little bit, but even then you see it. You could either see Arenado as a good buying opportunity right now as a whole when you're looking at it from a year-to-year perspective, right? So it all depends, I think, one, like what game are you playing? Are you still playing the flip game? Or are you playing, more of the long-term game? Do you believe in Corbin Carroll itself? Like you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned, but I know in the notes you mentioned Jordan Lawler. He's a guy that I'm actually looking forward to. Like he's a type of guy that I think could be a really likable superstar, kind of like a A-Rod type, caliber, a taller, bigger shortstop. But I don't think it should limit him from playing on Arizona, for instance, right? And, especially baseball now. Like now that we have the internet, I think a lot more people are moving out of it. And with the exception of probably Colorado and Minnesota, I think for the most part, everything's fair game, especially, you never know with Bowman Chrome prospects either, right? So Ethan Salas is the number one chase in 2023 Bowman Chrome right now. He's on San Diego, right? So, he's gonna, and he's even a catcher, right? So he's bringing in a lot more attention nowadays. The market is different, I think. The way people purchase are different. So I think there's still, opportunity in guys like that. I just think Corbin Carroll type players or any, like we talk about on this pod, they carry a significant premium just because they're the chase in the current set, right? So there's that factor in where, hey, he might be priced even high at this point compared to other rookies or other, superstar like type players, that have, 3-4 years like Bo Bichette, guys like that. So
sure. Yeah. Good points.
I feel like this is a little more, it's not as simple as you would think. I think when you look at the question, it feels very simple, but I feel like it can go a bit deeper. And I say that because the short end of it, does it affect the player's value, and perhaps long term? I think so. I mean, Corbin Carroll on Arizona versus if he was on the Yankees, I'm sure there'd be a massive price difference. But in terms of the, I don't think people should be carried away too much about small market, because winning changes everything, right? Even if you think about hockey,
sure.
Like I think it's not necessarily about the market. Maybe specifically for certain, like New York Yankees, there are certain markets that are very unique and specific and big,
right.
quote unquote, big market. But I think winning changes everything, and I think it's more about branding, like the marketing aspect of an NHL club or a baseball club. And for example, like, the longest time, Tampa Bay Lightning, they were newer to the NHL, like first 10, 15 years of their existence. They had Vinny LeCavalier. They went to the finals. Or did they win? I think they won. But they were bottom dwellers for the longest time. And now in the last 10 years, they've become, they're not considered a big market team, but they're a powerhouse, and people view them as a powerhouse, and people like to watch them. Same with Colorado Avalanche, right? So I think winning changes the marketing of a certain team. And, that's something that shouldn't be overlooked when you think about small markets, because small markets could be just as exciting as a big market, Las Vegas Knights, et cetera, right?
Yeah, that's, again, good points. And for me, honestly, it's just a factor. I think you guys kind of alluded to it. Small market, like when I try to decide who I want to invest in more mid to long term, it's just a factor.
Right.
And I also think it depends on the player. Like when you're talking about like marketing the team, is the player himself marketable? Like, is the league invested in this player being the face of the league, regardless of what team he plays for, right? And does this player have a personality that can carry himself, like, you know, in a smaller market and a bigger market, you know? And I think, you know, like Corbin Carroll is a great player, but, you know, I'm sure he's a nice guy, but I don't know in terms of marketability if, you know, he's like in your face and kind of, you know, that kind of player. Maybe that kind of impacts his overall value long term, right? So, you know, I rather probably invest in Jordan Lawler. He seems to be a more outgoing guy, extroverted, and he's also a big time. This is kind of a side note. I just read an article where Corbin Carroll, Jordan Lawler, and Evan Longoria, who all play for the Diamondbacks, are big time collectors now.
Right.
So
really?
they hit up like card shops where whenever they go to like a, you know, different city to play. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, so, you know, small market teams, it's just a factor, but I thought it was interesting because, you know, Corbin Carroll's having an amazing season. And, you know, one other thing is that you never know if they get traded, right? Like that's something you can't predict, but just say Carroll did get traded to the Yankees as an example, then that kind of, you know, that plays into it, right? So to close off this segment, I want to also like name a few other players from different sports, and you tell me if you would invest in them based on our conversation about them playing in small market teams, okay? Like how good you feel about investing in them, all right? So let's start with baseball. Bobby Witt Jr. playing for the Kansas City Royals. What do you guys think?
So I'm a huge fan of Bobby Witt Jr. I think he's a stud. His numbers are proving it this year. He's having a great season. He's going to be a 30-30 guy as well, potentially, you know, better in the future, right? Like, I think he's still young. Him and J-Rod are, you know, kind of like came up in the same class, and there was massive hype around them and massive chases. And I think that's the key is Bobby Witt, no matter how good he plays, his prices were still astronomical from the get-go, that you're still, no matter what he does, his prices are going to continue to correct. And I think that's fair to say. So I think I like Bobby Witt Jr. I think he's a good investment long term, but I still think the time isn't now to buy.
Okay.
Yeah, I will agree. I'm going to say, I mean, I'm only excited about Bobby Witt because of how much you guys are high on him. So I'm like, yeah, he's amazing. But I think time is not, you know, like we have been saying this forever. It's that the sort of the 1 to 3 hype window, 3-year hype window, like he's still in it. And for me, like kind of going back to the whole small market thing, I think even if you're on a small market team, that 1 to 3 window, if you're a hyped prospect and you're killing it, I think your pricing and the excitement about the player will go up regardless of whatever team you're on. But Clark, you made a good point about trading. That's something to watch out for, right? Like if once you get past the 1 to 3 year window, and you're in years 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, and pricing starts to level out and correct and come down. It is something to watch to see if like a team like Kansas City is continually a loser or continually losing. You can probably be assured that a big time player like Bobby Witt could get traded just exact same way that Juan Soto got traded out of Washington Nationals, right? So that is something to watch. Like, we talked about winning creates a certain marketing brand, but losing, on the other hand, in terms of investment, I think it's something to pay attention to and wait on, because I think some good players could eventually, move.
Yeah. I love Bobby Witt, but I think the city for me in this case matters. Not just in KC, but like, remember when they won the World Series? I was just checking it up in 2015. Like, I do not remember anyone on that team other than Salvador Perez. Other than exactly, because he was on my fantasy baseball team like year after year. Just the most reliable. Played almost 160 games as a catcher. I forgot that no one does that anymore.
They were good that year. Yeah.
They were amazing, and honestly, what I remember the most is the sports guys interviewing Paul Rudd because he's from Kansas City and he was at the World Series game. You know what I mean? So like, yes, winning kind of helps with card value if you're the main guy. But even then, like I maybe it's because Sal was a catcher, but like even if the Royals change things around quickly, which it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. You know, how much of a factor will Bobby Witt play? And I don't know if that will impact his value. So I'm great for PC if you're into Bobby Witt Jr. He's a big time collector as well, so I like that about Bobby Witt. But yeah, I'm gonna stay off him for now. Okay, hockey. We talked about this last episode, John, you and I. Kirill Kaprizov in Minnesota. What do you guys think?
I'm just looking. What's his Young Guns pricing like now?
It's probably like
you could go ahead, John.
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, Kaprizov. I mentioned this last time. I think he's still in that hype bubble. So right now is not the time. Yeah. Hockey is a little different because superstars, you know, baseball and basketball, stud franchise players move around like it's nothing. Hockey, it's not as much, you know. And Kaprizov is in. Right. You know, I took a couple of digs at Minnesota last week, the Minnesota Wild, but I mean they're playing way different than their image was in the past. They're exciting hockey, like they got some big time studs. I think Matt Boldy is a big time prospect, and he's breaking out, and he's probably going to break out even more this year. So I could see Kaprizov. I don't know if he's signed a long-term contract, but he's most likely going to sign one of these like 8-year, 81 million or whatever the $10 million per year contract is. I could see him signing that. So,
well, just to update you on the fly, he has signed a 5-year, $45 million contract.
Oh yeah, there you go.
With the Wild.
So he did sign, yeah. So hockey's a little different where like the studs don't really move around. So I don't think it's something where you can rely on trades. It's a little different, but yeah, I will say bottom line, now is not the time. But I think years 4 or 5, if Kaprizov continues to be a stud, which it should be expected, I think this guy should be like a 90-plus point getter every year. Yeah, there will be time to get him later on if you're big on him, like long term. But right now is not the time.
Okay.
So I just checked his Young Guns out. It's actually $175 for a PSA 10.
Wow. Okay.
So the Young Guns,
definitely. Yeah, the Young Gun. I mean, it's not a Future Watch auto or anything like that, but yeah, I think at these prices, like there could be opportunity. Like just because I think those Young Guns fluctuate. We've seen it with guys that have, I guess, 3-4 years in the league. You like what John was talking about. There has to be a little more time. Look at pricing. You had like the Austin Matthews and the Connor McDavid, that are the kind of like the standard of the Young Guns, which are in the thousands, right? So I think there are buying opportunities, but again, it's still early. I think, especially with hockey, it could sit sideways for the next 2-3 years, right? And you've seen that kind of with like Mitch Marner a bit, I would say, and Mitch Marner is couple years in ahead of Kaprizov, so.
Yeah. I agree. For me, with hockey, it's like the Canadian market. I think you mentioned this too, John, right? The Canadian market, especially if they play for Toronto, is really what elevates the base price of a lot of these players. And Kaprizov obviously isn't the number one target for Leafs fans or any Canadian hockey fans. So I think right now it seems inflated. I just looked at the Future Watch auto selling anywhere from $850 to $1,000, which seems pricey for me. And then you compare that to Mitch Marner, who plays for a big Toronto hockey market, and his regularly goes for about $1,000 as well. Right. And arguably, they're pretty close, I guess. But yeah, so
yeah, I think they're pretty close.
Yeah, right. So in terms of talent and points production, but yeah, I'm gonna stay away from Kaprizov unless the Young Guns that I didn't know was that sounds pretty cheap.
It's pretty cheap, I think, just in general, where you might be able to double up there if he ends up having a hot season. Yeah.
Yeah, I would make the young guns play, but not the future watch auto play. All right, two more. Football, Jordan Love in Green Bay.
Oh, man.
Do you think Jordan Love has to essentially play like Aaron Rodgers for his value to go up in a small market team like Green Bay?
For sure. I think his hype kind of died down. Like I was on that train a year ago or a couple years ago, and that's when you've seen some, positive action in his market. But I think these guys are all like, and usually Patrick Mahomes becomes the flagship because there's nothing other than modern cards that you could follow of trajectory, because Brady's on a different course. Everybody's trying to compare whoever to Brady. Mahomes comes probably the closest there. But then after that, it's, you could take the next quarterback, and everybody's trying to, find out who the next Mahomes is. And then you have the whole hype with, Josh Allen, Burrows, like all these younger quarterbacks, Trey Lance, like all these guys that are, and people are chasing, right? So that's what you're essentially going to get with Jordan Love is the volatility. But I think it's not, he's going to have to win. Aaron Rodgers won, right? So and even then Aaron Rodgers, gets no love.
Right. True.
Yep. Green Bay, small, quote unquote, small market, but at NFL, Green Bay is an iconic franchise.
Sure.
And the quarterback position is even more of an iconic position within Green Bay.
Right.
Similar to New England. Like anybody who pops into that quarterback position is going to be highly scrutinized, right? And good and bad. Like there could be a lot of hype. So I think Jordan Love, his cards are clearly taking a bit of flight because of that, because of the hype. Green Bay quarterback, high exposure. And it really comes down to whether you believe Jordan Love is a legitimate star quarterback in the league. And I think most people probably don't, if we're being honest, right? So if you have Jordan Love cards, I think it's a great time to take advantage of the volatility, because I personally, I don't see it. I don't see him being like a stud quarterback. And if you're thinking about buying Jordan Love cards right now, I would say no. But yeah, what do we know about NFL?
Green Bay's going all the way this year.
Watch. He's gonna get like 4 or 5 touchdowns per game, become MVP.
Yeah. You know what? But I will echo your sentiment about the quarterback position in football just having an outsized influence on like hobby card values. So if Green Bay can win, then I think Jordan Love, presumably will be a big part of that, and his cards will also spike. But the big question is, can Green Bay win? And from what I'm looking at in terms of researching how the teams will fare this year, KC I think is probably up there, Philadelphia Eagles, Niners. But yeah, you don't see anyone really talking about Green Bay making a Super Bowl run this year. So I'm staying off Jordan Love for that reason. Okay, lastly, for basketball, I chose a Canadian player. 6 letters, all right? You decipher this. SGA OKC. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander playing for Oklahoma City. What do you guys think? And don't let your Canadian biases influence your analysis.
Yeah, I think he's. We talked about this on the previous episode. He might be a buy now. And this is a perfect example. A small market team that I think has huge upside in terms of his talent. So I think there's opportunity there because some of his stuff is pretty cheap. And the way the market looks like with especially basketball, you have your. I picture it as like a balloon set up to like sail upwards to the air. So you have your national treasures and flawless that, that's going to be your first to come up, first to go down. And then everything else follows, depending on kind of desirability. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity with SGA and not his expensive stuff. I think his flawless NT are kind of outpriced. They're really expensive. Then you got all these other lower buying opportunities that haven't like taken off yet. So I think there are good buying periods for SGA in that sense. I think he's a type of player that you could potentially, just sit on and enjoy kind of his career and see what he does. And this is a perfect example of small market team, someone who could, still produce and still, I think, find value in the hobby.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
You guys, I think you guys are gonna know what I'm gonna say. But before I say that, I don't think SGA is. I mean, almost any card basketball right now is the right time to buy because it is preseason. Like we're about to go into the season. Right. So you're most likely, whatever you grab now is most likely going to be 10-20% cheaper in a couple of months. So that's a little bit of a caveat. But with that being said, I think this year is a good time to finally dig into some Shai Gilgeous-Alexander because I think he's getting the exposure in terms of being regarded as one of the top NBA players in the league. I think he's starting to get that recognition. And OKC, I mean, they're on the up and up. I think they're going to be one of these exciting new franchise small market teams on the up and up. They still have, I don't know, a gazillion first round picks that they can use at their disposal right. to bring on some big veterans or whatever they want to do. I think that GM has an incredible amount of assets that he can do to maneuver and put this team in a position to win either immediately or a giant sustainable long run. So I think OKC should be a team and SGA should be a player that people should be excited about.
Yeah, agreed. I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm all in on SGA. If I see a good deal, I want one. And then, I listen to other sports podcasts and it's funny how more and more people are talking about SGA as like a top 5 guy now. And
there you go.
And, he's on his way up in terms of like analysts, just, especially with the FIBA tournament recently, right. Like just showcasing his talents even more right. So, right? Like the best player on the court anytime he plays, essentially.
Clutch shots.
So
all of the above.
Exactly. I think that the fact that he plays for OKC, if it does at all lower the value, I think in this case it's a benefit for people that just believe in SGA, right? So I would take advantage of that if you see, pricing where it seems like a good value. So it might also be our Canadian influence, probably a little bit of that. People listening, it's like, oh, it's because they're Canadians. That might be partially true, but doesn't mean we don't like SGA. All right. Okay, well, thanks again to all our listeners for tuning in to our Friday edition of Cards to the Moon. We'll have a brand new episode this coming Tuesday. We'll see you then. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards or John at TradeU at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again and hope to connect soon.